Just a quick reminder before getting into the video proper. This Friday is when the Xenoblade 2 1.3 update comes out, and I will be streaming it the instant it drops, so follow my Twitch now and look out for an announcement video of when that stream goes live. If you're seeing this after the fact, I'll probably have uploaded the stream to this channel so you can catch it there anyway. In case you haven't heard it yet, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has been datamined, and people have found out a lot of really interesting things from it. Now, I'm not going to go over the most common stuff people have seen, such as the blade randomizer and the rarity rates for all the different rare blades that does in fact prove that kos-mos is by far the rarest one. Because you could find that in other places. I believe even Nintendo Life made an article about some of this stuff, so I'm going to skip over things like that, and this is just going to be a quick overview video of a couple things that I thought were cool that you could find in the datamine stuff. Now, I didn't do any of the data mining myself. I first saw it through the r/Xenoblade Discord server, specifically Discord user Moose Hunter, who I think is credited in the Nintendo Life article as well, so this is just me reporting on content that other people found. I didn't find any of this myself. I'm just giving my own spin on this stuff. And also, one of these things involves the ending of the game, so there are going to be spoilers throughout the entire thing. With that said, let's get to it. The three biggest things that I saw that were data mined are different data and formulas, like data tables for the different blades and stuff, the damage formula, that kind of thing, the technical aspect of stuff, the cutscene subtitles, and every audio file in the game. So I actually have clean game rips of all the characters' battle dialogue and the entire OST, which is probably what you've been hearing in the background for the entire video. It's great. It's still probably going to get the OST CD if possible for that little extra bump in quality, but this is definitely more usable than the direct recordings from the game that I've been using up until now. The first thing I want to look at is Jin's audio file for his battle dialogue as a party member in chapters 1 and 8. He uses the same file both times since the game counts him as the same party member just leveled up. He actually has lines for 4 different arts, even though he can only use 3 when you control him in chapter 8. When you can control him in chapter 8, he only has 3 arts since he functions just as a regular driver with only 1 blade. He has Ultra Slash, which is just a regular back attack and is named after a back attacking art from X, Skyward Slash, which is, I believe, AoE and Break, and Heavenly Disrupt, which is the entire rest of a driver combo, so it'll topple, launch, and smash within 1 art. However, the voice clip of him calling out Empty Moment, which is an art he uses a lot in his boss fights, is also present in the battle dialogue file as well, and I believe that he can actually use Empty Moment as a party member on the ship in chapter 1 when he's not playable, so he does have 4 arts in the game, you just can't control all 4 of them.
Ultra Slash! Skyward Slash! Empty Moment!
In addition to that, he also has voice lines where he's addressing Tora, Morag, and Zeke, who he's never in the party at the same time as. If you do remember, the Nia lines make sense since he is with her in chapter 1 and you can choose to put them both in the party, but he never interacts with the other 3 party members, so this suggests to me that either it's something to prevent the game from crashing if he's hacked in to be played with one of those 3, even though they could just put a dummy file or just have it play nothing, or chapter 8 was originally intended to be a lot longer and Jin would stick with the party for a longer period of time, or he'd stay with you throughout the world tree or something. Basically, he was intended to be playable alongside the full party at one point.
Boy! Nia! Tora! Morag! Zeke! Careful, fuzzball!
I'm actually more inclined to believe the later theory, because if you go and check Malos and Vandom's lines, they don't have anything for addressing party members that they're not in the party with at the same time. So if it was just to prevent some sort of hacking thing, you'd think Vandom would be able to address Tora and Zeke, and as would Malos or something. But they don't, so that just leads me to believe that Jin was supposed to be possibly even a permanent party member since he's not one of the New Game Plus blades. This next thing is really, really weird and doesn't make any sense to me, but if you go into Morag's voice lines, she doesn't actually have a clip for calling out Bridget's name when you switch to her. She has one for all the other rare blades and generic blades, so there's one for every blade she can use, but in place of one for Bridget, you instead get her calling out Dromark's name for some reason.
Dromark, Sever, Akos, Petroka, Mikhail, Abrona, Perdido, Cressidus, Aegeon, Godfrey, Wolfric, Percival, Gorg.
While I don't have the Japanese version of that file to compare it with, I'm inclined to believe that this is just some sort of translation oversight and Not like, oh, she was planned to be able to use Dromark when Nia's in Blade form or something, or, oh, every character gets to become a Master Driver in New Game Plus, because all 7 New Game Plus blades are already in the voice files for the drivers, so they have the arts they get from those new weapon types, as well as talking to that blade. And no other character has anything that they use to address other characters' main blades besides Rex, who has one for everyone's except Poppy, of course. So it's not that Morag was intended to use Dromark unless that had something to do with Nia's blade form. It seems like they just recorded the wrong line, and I honestly don't know if this will even be patched in, because the Bridget line isn't in the file at all, and all the New Game Plus required lines are in there too, besides maybe ones for cutscenes. So there might not even be a line to patch in, and we might end up having to wait for the new story DLC's voice audio to be recorded before that thing gets fixed at all. And last but not least, when it comes to battle dialogue, I just kind of want to show you a bit of Cressidus' dialogue, because he sounds like Big the Cat. I kind of want him to be one of the first blades besides Akos I get in New Game Plus, because I want Big the Cat.
Joining with me was the best choice you made all day. All right, let's have a rampage. Let's go all in. Give them that sweet Nia magic, Nia. Leave some for me, Morag. Who needs a plan when we're this mighty? Between Zeke and me, the enemy's doomed.
Now moving into the text that was datamined, there isn't really much to share besides one thing about the ending, but they were able to get the names for the merc groups of all the blades that are new to New Game Plus and blades that you couldn't send on merc missions before, and a lot of them are just kind of ones that you'd expect, like Inflammables for Pyra, Mithra's Minions, spelled with a Y, Dromark's Dragoons, a bunch of good Poppy and QT puns, stuff like that. But the best one, by far, is Pandoria's merc group name, which is literally Team Zeke Forever, with like a 4 instead of the letters FOR. It's probably the best thing about this game now, and I've seen Turters, so it is pretty good. And from that, we move on to the most controversial part of the game, the ending. Now, there's only one big thing here, but it is really interesting and probably tells a bit about the game's development process. In the files for the subtitles of the last cutscene in the game, there's actually a large amount of lines that are tagged to not be displayed on screen, but are still in the game's data. The majority of these are actually the official lyrics to One Last You, the ending theme, which is cool because the OST isn't out yet, so the only lyrics for it we've had were people getting it by ear, and this is a really interesting way to get the official ones. It turns out that they're really Englishy, but what are you gonna do? The more interesting part about this, though, is that there are also 3 other lines that aren't part of the song, and they are undisplayed subtitles for the line that Pyra or Mithra says right at the end, which is normally just the camera panning on their mouth and some unvoiced line going through. The lip syncing for that is actually different in the English and Japanese version, so people are trying to cross-reference them to figure out what they might be saying. Now, this isn't shown in-game, and from what I can tell, a spoken line of any of this hasn't been found, so I'm not about to say these are the canon lines that they say, but these were clearly the intent of the developers at some point in time. 2 of these lines are actually character-specific. There's one that's very obviously from Pyra and one that's very obviously from Mithra, but the third one is actually ambiguous. It could be from both of them. That one is just, "Hello, Rex." This, I'm taking it as, oh, this is the best possible ending where they somehow kept their memories despite dying. Presumably, this is a theory that a few people have had, but I agree with, that if you maxed out their affinity or got their affinity to a certain level, then they'd have the ending where they'd remember you, and if you didn't, you'd get one of the other 2 character-specific ones, where they just say, "Hello, I'm Pyra," or "Hello, I'm Mithra," implying that they did lose their memories, and upon seeing the party, didn't recognize the fact that, oh, they'd already know who we are. So, it appears that not only were there originally the 2 versions of the cutscene depending on who you named the Numa form after, but there were actually 2 full endings of the game where the Aegis kept her memories or lost her memories, presumably dependent on some sort of action you did. That's really, really interesting, and while the fact that these are unused and we have no idea which the quote-unquote canon line was supposed to be, this doesn't really change people's opinions on the ending in any way, it's still cool to think about the fact that they were intending this at some point in development. Now, I'm sort of thinking that they ended up scrapping this because your personal actions in the game having some sort of outcome on the ending hasn't been a thing that was explored in any of the previous Xenoblade games or the earlier Xeno games in general, so maybe not having precedent for it made them not want to do that, and all of a sudden, oh, hey, you didn't do this thing well enough, guess your main characters forgot who they were. I guess they didn't want to pull that. The only reason they're sort of getting away with the two forms having different endings in general is the fact that you can swap between them in the cutscene viewer later on, so they could sort of get around that. In general, me, as well as most people who don't like the ending, it doesn't really change their opinions on it, but it's cool to find out stuff like this. Like, I doubt we're gonna get anything out of a few developer interviews in terms of insight into how the game was made, so just finding out this stuff, even if it's just cut content, is really interesting. And last but not least, it's time for the charts and data section. I know I saved all the weird math stuff for last, but there are a couple cool things in here too. The first thing is flavor text for all 6 Blade specials that aren't actually viewable in a menu. That includes the 2 versions of the Pyra and Nia combined level 4, as well as all 4 of Numa's specials. Pyra and Nia's are called either Union Sword or Nexus Force, depending on who you initiate the combo with it, and they both have the flavor text, beat the enemy to a pulp with a medley of fire and water. Now that's not the coolest part, because it's just a really generic thing besides the names. But we've got Numa level 1, Starburst, blast a merciless Siren beam through enemies. So yes, that attack is her shooting a blast from the Artifice Siren at the enemy. Level 2, Radiant Flare, attack hostiles with a light speed attack. Now this is interesting if you're actually trying to power scale Xenoblade characters, because this does confirm that one cutscene where Rex and Jin are fighting and they're like all flying around and stuff and they're able to keep up with each other, that yes, Rex is able to actually go at the speed of light and is matching up with Jin at his full power there. So that's kind of cool. That's actually going to come into play in a video I want to make in the future, which is going to be Rex versus Cross versus Shulk, and it's going to try to figure out which of the 3 Xenoblade protagonists would win a fight, so look forward to that at some point eventually. Numa's level 3, Genesis Saber, pierce enemies with countless light blades created by Ether. That's just, hey, she's doing a blade storm with all her like little light constructs that sort of look like her sword, and that's her level 3. And exclusive to New Game Plus, we've got level 4, Infinity Blade. Unleash energy and sever the enemy with a sword of light. Not sure what this looks like, but there are voice files for both Rex and Numa where they're calling out this art, so it is definitely her level 4.
Yeah! Time to bring out the big guns! What? Infinity Blade! Carve a path to the future!
Calling Siren. Do you read me? Infinity Blade! We shall shape the future we hope for together, Rex.
And you're going to find that out on Friday, and actually, if you're viewing this anything later than the week it comes out, you probably already know, so that's the unseen special text. Next up is the list of drivers in the game. So that includes the final party of Rex, Nia, Tora, Morag, and Zeke, of course, as well as Vandam, who joins for a chapter, and Jin, who joins for a chapter, and Malos, who I guess also joins for a chapter. So those are the 8 that you already know about. Those are in the game. You could just play through and see all those. But there is actually a 9th in the list. Hollow, spelled H-O-L-L-O. Now, I have no idea who that is. Nobody has any idea who that is. There isn't a character in the game, even in Japanese, who's named Hollow. So, I kind of want to see if that's... I have no idea what that is. That's cool that they had another driver or something in there, but the name doesn't connect it to anything that actually happens in the game, so either this is the protagonist of the DLC campaign, or this was just some sort of debugging, testing character that they used instead of any of the actual party members, because there are certain debug items in the game, like a special kind of booster that guarantees your chance of getting a rare blade. I kind of wish they'd release that one to the public, but you know. So that's really cool. There is a 9th driver besides the ones that are actually usable, so who knows, we'll need to sit on that one to see whether anything actually comes out of that. But it's cool, it's there. And last but not least, we've got just a general chart of rare blade data. Now, this is just a list of all the rare blades in the game in some sort of order, sort of close to the way they are in the Blade album. And it's just a list with a bunch of columns: name, gender, weapon type, role, element, cooldown time, and then all the mods that they add to your stats when you have them equipped. This is cool for 3 things, 2 of which are sort of inner workings of the game type stuff, and the third of which is the title of this video. The first is the name of the third blade in the list, which you can tell from context clues is obviously Numa, but the name is listed as Homori name. Now, Homori is the Japanese equivalent of Pithra, which is a name that Rex suggests as something to call the combined form before Mithra's like, hey, just choose one of us and we'll go with that. Homori is a combination of Homura for Pyra and Hikari for Mithra, so that's where that comes from. It's just another portmanteau thing. They didn't bother translating it because they knew it wouldn't show up in the game, and that's actually a running thing that you'll see in a couple of the later things. Going with this, however, Rex has an unused voice line where instead of shouting Pyra or Mithra like he usually does, or some generic actiony line when they transform into Numa, he'll instead say
Pythra!
Which goes to show that Pithra/Homori was actually the intended name for the Numa form at some point. I think, actually, that this third name goes together with the third subtitle set in the ending. Back when you'd actually find out what they'd say, possibly there was a third option that would cause her to remember, presumably by actually giving Numa form a name that's a combination of the two instead of choosing one over the other. So if you chose one over the other, both would come back, but they'd lose their memories. But if you chose to combine them, only the true form would come back, but she'd still have her memories. That actually makes a more compelling ending, in my opinion, and I kind of wish they went with that, but unfortunately it's just unused. It's still cool to find out that that was a thing, but it is unused. Secondly is just a bit of insight into how a certain thing works behind the scenes wise. There are actually 2 dummy blades in the list, one for Rex and one for Jin. They're called Utsuro, which I'm not sure what that translates to, and dummy for Shin, Shin being Jin's Japanese name. These are basically what the game counts as Rex and Jin's blades whenever they're in the party, Rex being in Chapter 1 and Jin both times. Because they're not actually acting as drivers at that point, but they still fight, so they have to have some sort of quote-unquote blade in the coding to, I guess, work to make them do things. Every other blade in the list has their element listed as whatever their element is, and Numa's is in fact light, so even if you name her after Pyra, her element will shift to light for that minute. Both dummies actually don't have an element at all, so even in Chapter 8, when you already sort of know what element Jin is from fighting him a bunch of times, you can't hit people's weaknesses with it. Now, in here, Utsuro is listed as a tank and not an attacker, which I think is a typo in the data mining, because you can tell just by looking at Rex in the party screen that he is an attacker, but the weapon type is broadsword. If you want to go into the art upgrading menu for Rex before meeting Pyra, his weapon type will indeed be listed as broadsword and have a unique icon completely different than the Aegis sword it turns into anytime after that point, which is just a really nice attention to detail. And if you look closely, his portrait actually doesn't even have the X from the core crystal on it too, which is doubly cool. They actually made a separate portrait, even though the game appears to count him as the same driver, since judging by the files, there isn't like Chapter 1 Rex, regular Rex, and Master Driver Rex as 3 different things. If you look at Jin's dummy, it's listed as an attacker, which goes with what he shows up as in the menu, and his weapon type is actually Nodachi. That's what it's listed as. It's just the type of sword he uses, I guess. I don't know Japanese swords well enough to know if the design it uses is accurate to what you'd call an actual Nodachi, but that's his weapon type name. Even though you can't see it anywhere in game, it is listed in the files somewhere. Another interesting thing is both of those dummies are listed as female, even though the drivers themselves are male, and those dummies are just stand-ins to let the drivers use arts. The way I see it, I'm assuming that female is the default option for gender, so female would be 0 and male would be 1 or something along those lines. Because Pyra is the first blade in the list, and since she's female, it would just make more sense to use her gender as the default option. So, since there's no need to send any of those on Merc missions, since they're just dummy blades that you literally don't have access to Merc mission, or, well, you technically do, but you can't send them on them, it didn't matter what to set them as, they just put it at the default. And that all comes around to the question I asked in the title of the video. What exactly is ROC'S gender? Now, he is referred to as male at every point in time in actual cutscenes by the characters, but when it comes to Merc mission purposes, he doesn't seem to count as male or female. In terms of, like, if this mission requires X amount of male blades or X amount of female blades, he won't work for either of them, while every other blade in the game will only work for one. So, there is actually a gender column in this list of rare blades, so I can actually find that out. And the answer is 4. The number 4. ROC'S gender is 4. I don't know what you want to make out of that, but that's what the game says, so that's what I'm going with. Always has been, always will be, ROC is 4. Whether it's for the stream of New Game Plus or the next Xenoblade video I make. Till next time, this is Luxon, signing off.